We're ready? Awesome. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last hurrah. We've reached the end of APRICOT. So hopefully you've had a great week. You've met some new people, made some networks. Our first speaker today is Pindar Wong, who is Chairman of Consultancy at VeriFI Hong Kong Limited. Pindar will be speaking today about routing money on the internet.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Apologies to Christian Wiedemer, but does anyone remember the cover of this book? Oh, good, I can sit down now. This book was an inspiration to me, because like APRICOT, you learn what you need to know for the next year. I happened to have a role in ISP back in 1993, and we didn't know what we were doing. We're kind of figuring it out as we go along, reading through RFCs and trying to swap notes, just like an APRICOT, a lot of practical history. And this book was inspirational to me, because when I read it, I was, oh, that's kind of what we're doing. So what I've tried to do here is borrow from the title, which was Routing in the Internet to Routing Money in the Internet. And the reason being is, I mean, this is a closing plenary, and I think the role is slightly different, which is instead of trying to set the tone for the event, I would like to try and stimulate some thought looking forward for the next year. Now, I just need to do a bit of a disclaimer, because this talk is not about Bitcoin. All right, how many of you have heard of Bitcoin? How many of you have heard of Mt. Gox? Okay, this is impressive. I know I'm in the right place. I'm actually not going to talk about that, so let's just move on. I will talk about it briefly as an example, but if I may have the next slide, please. Okay, so the next 3 slides, we're just going to play a guessing game, which is, which global network is this? It has a history stemming back to 1973, and this is the graph of the number of countries connected to this global network. And by 2004, it reached about 200 countries. Similarly, over that period, these are the number of members connected to this global network. And that now, in about 2013, was about 10,000 members. Last but not least, this is the number of messages that this global network passed over time. It now reaches in the order of 4.5 billion messages per year. There is a bit of a giveaway here. You'll notice in this graph on the right-hand side, the bottom one's 2008, 2007, 2008, the graph goes down. Does anyone know what happened in 2008? The global financial crisis. So no surprise, this network is a global network, which is not the internet. That's also been in existence for 40 years. It's the SWIFT network, which is basically the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. Now, the interesting thing of this global payment network, which has been pressed into service over the last 40 years, is present in 212 different countries, 10,000 different banks connect to this network. It's a network that you and I do not have access to, right? It's a global network. There are bits on a disk that sit there that is in this banking network with tallies, which is not the internet. The interesting thing is that this network was connected to Hong Kong in 1980. Contrary to popular belief, it no longer runs on X25. That network was dismantled in 2005. And it's interesting because they also have free and open standards, okay? This ISO 20022. So today's talk is really divided into 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to share some experience. I'm from Hong Kong, made in Hong Kong. And I'm going to talk to you about some activities that we're doing here in the so-called digital buffer state. I'm going to talk about tragedy and hope as it relates to the banks in Hong Kong. But I want to mirror that with what I see as tragedy and hope, the writing on the wall for ISPs. And I think you all in this room are ISPs. Last but not least, I'll talk about identity service providers and how it relates to some of the W3C work that I'm involved with. So Hong Kong digital buffer state, we commercially connected to the internet about 1993, and by 2004, we've got wonderful broadband, wonderful wireless data. Are we done? I basically think so. I think our infrastructure as a build-out is basically complete. We've got enough bandwidth to do what we need to do, and it's all there. But as a open and free economy, what we're trying to do is pivot. We've got a deep water port, lots of physical containers, trading physical goods. And what we're trying to do, and some of us are trying to do, is position Hong Kong to trade the next thing, which is the global trade of intangibles, intellectual property on the internet. Now, it turns out that we've built over the last year and a half 5 different exchanges where you can list your intellectual property and then you can create a market to buy and sell. It turns out that there's a problem, and that problem is if you want to license your photograph or if you want to license your website design, getting paid for it is incredibly hard. It's not hard, but if you're talking in the order of dollars or even less cents, then the cost of routing that so-called money globally becomes prohibitive. So even if, like the phenomenon of iTunes, the 99 cents for the license of a song, there's a whole business dynamic that occurs when you reach a right price point. But routing that 99 cents globally is a problem. It's a problem because 1.5 billion people don't have a bank account, or don't have access to a credit card, or don't have access to the internet through fixed line. So the interesting thing is Hong Kong is also a global financial center. And there's lots of things that we're doing in terms of the Chinese currency, the yuan, and how it's going to be internationalized. So at some point, China's going to want to license its IP internationally, and maybe it can do through Hong Kong because we have so-called the rule of law. We're also the second largest trading place for the yuan internationally. And recently, or at least over the last year and a half, we've had lots of interest in cryptographic currencies. Bitcoin and the 80 other different variants. How do you, I mean, is it really money? And the title here is Routing Money. Some people believe so. And for those of you who know Bitcoin and been following Mt. Gox, there are mistakes that are being made, but perhaps it's early days. So just to give you an idea of the banking sector, we have one of the highest concentration of banks on the planet. Out of the top 100 banks by market cap, 70 of them have presence in Hong Kong, and we have a 3-tiered system: licensed banks, restricted banks, etc. How does that relate to the internet? Well, let's compare the two, because I see a lot of parallels between the stresses in the banking sector. We have so many banks, we've got 7 million people, not that many people. Who actually are we banking for? Well, we're actually banking for the rest of the region. And so are there comparisons between the stress on banks? Some of them are, again, closing their branch offices. You've probably experienced that back home. It takes a lot of money to keep a branch open, people's staff, so that people can get their access to their money, especially in rural areas. Now, do you have compliance? You certainly do. As ISPs, you've got compliance. Perhaps even more heavily regulated than ISPs is the financial sector, the banks themselves. I view these businesses as basically a bookkeeping service on top of a network. Now, what you do on that network, whether or not you sell content, etc., is interesting. Are there settlements? Settlements between banks? Yes. Settlements between ISPs? Yes. Do you need to know your customer in meat space? Absolutely. Certainly for law enforcement purposes. The question that I have is, what is the finesse of knowing your customer online? Now, for banks, they have a very strict requirement for knowing who the online identity is. Why? For anti-money laundering purposes and for law enforcement. To me, online identity for ISPs is perhaps less clear. So the tragedy here, as I see it, or the writing on the wall, is that there's a huge, I think there's some stress in terms of the diversity of ISPs and diversity of banks. Maybe we have too many banks. But for ISPs themselves, how do we measure the health of this whole industry that over the last 20 years we've been liberalizing? Now, some may view that the payment infrastructure is really a utility. And what I mean by utility is that it's low cost, it's reliable, predictable. They're low margins because it needs to happen, society needs to function. And the low barriers of entry to add value on top of it and to innovate, so-called, as we do on the internet, permissionless innovation, just like the electricity system. Why? Because there's a much wider societal benefit. Now, the downside to that, unfortunately, if you're a utility, and as Geoff has told us for the last 15 years, is that, look, you've got a scale, mate, right? That's unfortunately very low profit. So you've got to get big real quick, or you've got to find your niche to add value. The question is, and in the banking sector in 2007, 2008, we had too big to fail. Remember that? Well, those banks are even bigger. And part of the problem there was because some of the payment stuff, the utility retail banking side, just like your points of presence, is really low margin. In fact, it costs them money to operate that stuff. So they have to go so-called in the investment side to generate that income. Customer choice, that's an open question. And it's all been about, I would hope, your value in the last mile. Who owns that customer? Now, I believe right now the writing's on the wall for the ISP industry because I think the business model is changing. Now, I think everyone in this room probably understands the significance of the Comcast Netflix deal. Is that correct? Right. This is, in some sense, a very subtle writing on the wall, where to get access to so-called my customers, sorry, I'm not on V6. Well, no, in fact, Comcast is one of the largest V6 deployments in the States, which is interesting, right? But to get that quality to the eyeballs for Netflix, there's been this deal. It's gonna be very interesting. So Comcast is very interesting. Great network. They're doing the right thing. V6 deployment. Is that going to be the model for the future, where the larger ISPs, have we basically, over the last 20 years, the people we've become daddy, okay, who we've been fighting against, right? Are we really now the new telcos? But have we gone up a layer from basically the message, the transport layer to content? That's very interesting to me. And I think it's a little bit, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, both from the regulatory position and from the survival of those ISPs who serve a niche market or who are not national. They're going to have to try and find a value proposition. And what I would like to explore here is the very value proposition for those ISPs to be in the business of identity and to be part of a new global payment network, which we're trying to build in a community group inside the W3C. Now, why is this important? Well, I think the diversity is important. I think the ability to have low barriers of entry so that people can innovate, so-called the permissionless innovation. And if I'm a content provider going on the internet, well, my customers pay to get on the internet. Are we moving, in Leo's words, to a model in which you not only have to pay onto the internet, on the internet, but also have to pay to get off the internet? And the person who's receiving that data has to pay twice. It's unclear to me. So the health of the ISP ecosystem is something that I happened to have breakfast with Leo from ICANN, the INS side. We talked about this morning how, and this is kind of a lead-in, I hope, for Geoff, or perhaps Geoff, you can take this up. Well, how are you going to measure ISP ecosystem health? Perhaps different ways. One thing that we were brainstorming this morning is the number of people per ASN. Okay. So we looked at Netherlands, population 16.8, number of ASN numbers 734, China, etc., etc. Interestingly, Hong Kong, we have 15,000 approximately people per ASN. That's a lot of diversity, and as you probably see in tomorrow's APNIC meeting, you will have a lot of new members of APNIC who are also from Hong Kong. Well, maybe there's a link there with some of the things that we're doing. The main point here is, how do we preserve permissionless innovation when you as a business have really to either go up and scale and get large? And how do you keep that ecosystem where, if you're in the business of content distribution, or if you're in the business of co-location, where the content provider is buying a cage from you or a rack from you to reach everyone, when perhaps, and I'm speculating completely here, the larger access networks later on might say, hey, sorry, you're going to have to house your equipment on my network, or minimally pay access to my customers. So here, the parallel I wish to draw is some of the crunch time in ISP land, I think, is also happening in finance land, in an area of financial technology. And I'll go through here. And I think this provides an opportunity for us in this part of the world. I would like to begin here with a question, which is, in places like Africa, where they don't have a banking infrastructure, mobile phone companies serve the purpose of a payment network. So my question, my operating question here is, are ISPs the new banks with some new technology that we're developing? Or alternatively, are banks the new ISPs? And this goes back to your exit model as an ISP. If you can't go up and get large, who are you going to sell to if you want to exit that way? Why? Because again, there's some similarities of how banks operate, how they need to know your customer. And you ISPs know your customer. Are there similarities there? I think so. Interestingly, we've got other payment developments outside the traditional banking network, large payment networks from people who sell stuff. In China, we have Alipay, part of Alibaba. In the United States, you have Amazon with Amazon Payments. These web companies, these internet companies, are now doing payment functions. Why? Because they've got critical mass. How do the banks view that? Are they under threat? So really here, what I would like to look at is recent history, which is last year. And I find this really quite fascinating because the US Federal Reserve, they had, excuse me, a call, an open call for looking how to improve the payment system in the US. Why? Because their payment infrastructure was not necessarily meeting their needs. The expectation these days by the youth is, I want to pay, and it has to happen in milliseconds. Weeks isn't going to cut it. So there's a user demand there. Not only that, and the Federal Reserve is an example of a central bank, there is the mother central bank, this hierarchy of central banks, and at the top of it is the central bank of central banks, the Bank of International Settlements. And they too issued a report last year on payments and settlement systems. So the banking system, the banking group here, is actively trying to innovate, is actively trying to change because customer needs are changing. They're innovating, but there's another space outside of this, so-called the Bitcoin world, the cryptographic world, the world which is trying to generate new forms of value, which I find incredibly interesting. Mathematically, absolutely, but in terms of a new way of generating value. But as we've seen, and as I asked earlier, there are problems, right? You can read that, open the newspaper, there are people who are claiming, hey, look, my money is still with Mt. Gox, this Bitcoin exchange in Japan. So we're making mistakes, again, just like we did in the ISP industry in the mid-90s. So here, if we look at them in terms of how the technology in the financial technology space develops, there are challenges and opportunities. In the old world, we have both similar. They have to know your customer. You as ISPs know who you connect into your network. The banks have to know who connect to their network. The status quo, they've got an existing system, this global network SWIFT, but they've got 1970s technology, automated clearinghouses, right? Credit cards. To the developed world, that's fine, but to the developing world, they may not have access to credit cards, and it probably perhaps doesn't make a difference. In areas where they're established banking, they've got lots of rules and regulations, i.e. really heavily regulated. So with disruptive technology comes along with new value generation, such as Bitcoin, what are the regulatory problems? We can see that now in Japan, where the regulators say, hey, look, the Bitcoin world is not regulated. It has nothing to do with us. And yet in other countries, you will need a money transmitter license and all that rigmarole to jump through in order to operate this kind of business. Just like in the 1990s when we started the ISP world, I'm sorry, if you wanted to do this internet thing, you have to become a carrier, right? No, I'm not going to do that. We just got to get on with it and then have that evolution and policy revolve. Now, within the new entrants in terms of this technology development in financial technology, the new forms of value, right? This cryptographic country, there's opportunity for new status quo and policy, but it's going to be messy. So the traditional way within the financial technology sector for innovating is driven by the banks and financial institutions naturally. Their business model is to take a transaction cost, capture the money, and there's incremental innovation at the core of this huge network that they have to upgrade, and that's difficult, as we know. It's extremely expensive given legacy systems, and it's slow. They have very highly regulated with know your customers. Whereas internet companies, technology companies per se, they're not banks. And they innovate at the edge. All this innovation with PayPal, et cetera, all this great stuff is actually happening because the network doesn't really care. And it's inexpensive to do. There's no legacy to protect. And the innovation cycle is fast. But similarly, we have very clear know your customer rules. So last year, in terms of the innovation in the finance technology space, where there's no incumbent, there's no banking system that has a vested interest in its preservation. It does, but I mean, perhaps it's very small part of the economy. And when there's new technologies, great innovation in places like Kenya, mobile payment, M-Pesa. So the opportunity here, at least some of us in this World Wide Web Consortium Web Payments Community Group, is to basically make the web the new payment network. Okay, make it as easy to make global payment as it is to send email, and to drive the cost of making that transaction down to zero. Now we believe that, or some of us believe, that if you do that, we're going to have a new boom, new business models. For example, if you're a blogger and you've a lot of people who subscribe to your blog, and if you charge 10 cents and you've got 100,000 customers, you can survive. Similarly, as we experienced in Hong Kong, trying to do new forms of trade with intangibles, with intellectual property, the long tail side, the price point matters, but the cost of routing that money is currently very difficult. So the W3C I don't need to go through. The Web Payment Community Group, we have a website. The approach that we're doing is very different. Right now, you've got these silos, these payment and software marketplaces that are particular to the platform, either iOS or Android. And we want to try and reinvigorate the web in many sense by having the programmers who program for the web have automatic access, so that on a single device, your wallet doesn't follow the device. It can be somewhere else. And in fact, in your wallet, you will choose the payment mechanism that you wish to do. So the interesting thing is that we built on MozPay, Mozilla. This basic technology is already in the Firefox phone. So the tech is done. The policy side is not done. And this morning, you spent the whole morning talking about policy. So what I'm trying to allude to here is that I don't think the innovation on the internet is done by a long shot. So-called internet governance. This is a great example of a new space where there needs to be some coordination and policy at the global layer, because in some sense, the technology is already there. If you can just bring up the web payments website, please. So the URL is webpayments.org. This is payment technologies on the web. And what we're trying to do is build payments into the core infrastructure, just like for HTML. If we can put payment inside the core infrastructure for the web, if you can scroll down a little bit, please. That's what this group of 100-odd people are trying to do. There's code there. If you can just scroll down to the very bottom. We want to build a better web. The approach is the same as deployment for the approach. What we've basically got are 6 different protocols. The most interesting thing of what we're trying to do right now is you've got this closed world with their proprietary standards for payment, and you've got people in the open world who are doing open standards. What we're trying to do is bring those two worlds together in a very simple way, to have a very standard form for request of payment and a very standard form for digital receipts. So where are we? This is very early days. If we can bring up the next slide, please. Which is the workshop, sorry, the tab, sorry, the tab workshop. Yep. So right now, this is a community group, which is just, it has no standing. This doesn't, we have a workshop next month in Paris. Well, no, we're not supposed to do sales here in APRICOT. It's not, because this event's already full. This event is trying to bring together the SWIFT group, people who are in traditional payments, banks, regulators. We have the US Federal Reserve coming. We're trying to resolve the policy issues on how to do this very simple thing. Have a very common way of initiating the request, and having digital receipts. The interesting thing with the technology that's been developed is really two things in my view. The first is that if you list your product or service now on the internet, it's no use if it can't be discovered. So a lot of the RDFA and RDF technology is already built in there. The other interesting thing is that with respect to your digital receipts and all your financial information, that follows you. It's not your bank. It's not your, you have control of your identity information. So what that may mean in the future is that if you wish to move banks, you can just take all your information with you about your financial history and move to another bank, because that information is yours. And that's why this is slightly different from the traditional models, because the role of the identity is different. And where this is interesting to ISPs in terms of your exit strategy is, again, since you, just like the banks know your customer, perhaps the role of an ISP in future is no longer about bandwidth, it's no longer about internet addresses. It's about managing the very subtle interface between maintaining the identity of the individual or the business in meet space and that online. Because as we know online, we can have multiple identities. Last slide, please. Back to the presentation. Sorry, it's a PDF, I think, yeah. Right. So the roadmap here is actually, this group's been existing since the financial crisis, 2008. We help with defining RDFA, the resource description framework attributes aspect. In 2009, we started work on JSON LD. I think everyone knows JSON LD. That was one of the outcomes in terms of linked data. It's very heavily used in public sector information. This, people who have joined the group are those, including people who are developing the browsers, the browser manufacturers, people in the financial sector like Bloomberg, and people in the new area of cryptographic currencies. So the interesting thing here is that we've presented last year at the Global Banking Conference for SWIFT, the network I talked earlier in Dubai. And what we're trying to do is, again, bring the two communities who innovate in finance with the traditional web communities. And I said, last year, in terms of, we had these series of events in Africa and Hong Kong, etc. In March next month, we're going to have this first working group. Hopefully, we'll hash out, again, the details of the spec. It's all online. You can download the code, which is also there, so that we can resolve exactly what the needs are. And the view here is, after that, is to formally form the working group. I think we have critical mass to do so. Finalize the specs within 2016 and release it as a first world standard in 2017. So that's the roadmap here. The opportunity, as I see it, for our part of the world is to get in at the ground floor. As part of our working group, we have, I think, the second largest payment provider from Korea. CNIC is participating in this conference in Paris, and several other people from the world. So this is an early emergent area, and I think the opportunity is that we can start to look at this area, look at what happened, for example, in places like Hong Kong, where our infrastructure is built out. We're done as far as infrastructure. We're going to have to look at the content layer, which everyone's looking at now, how to get value out of that content layer. It may be movies, but if you want to pay for movies, is that going to be inside your network, or can we do something on the web? So the key thing here is the rate of change. Traditional financial networks have a certain rate of change. We believe that the people in the working group can, and the tech companies, members of the W3C, can innovate perhaps at a faster rate. So with that, thank you very much. I'll take questions at this point, if any. Nope. If so, I hand over to Geoff. Are you ready? I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
The microphone. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Pindar. Philip Smith, could you please come to the stage and present Pindar? Stay where you are, with just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much for the enlightening talk. Okay, now our next speaker is Geoff Huston, Chief Scientist from APNIC, and he'll be giving us an update on the BGP in 2013, including the growth of the eBGP routing table over time and some projections on future growth. Thank you, Geoff.
Good afternoon all, this is me, I'm Geoff Huston, I'm with APNIC. You know, Pindar, I couldn't help thinking of John Law, 1691 to 1729 I believed, who wandered around Europe basically saying this whole thing about silver and gold, you know, we could just exchange bits of paper as promissory notes, as a promise of silver and gold, you don't need to move the money. Revolutionary. Unfortunately, his fate was also somewhat revolutionary. A man who was appreciated by history and not in his own time. Pindar, I think your project has much better chance of success. But it is a period of time and paper no longer cuts it. And indeed, I was reflecting on that and thinking, you know, it is a message for our time. But from the prosaic down to the technical, because this next talk is entirely different. And unlike Pindar's excellent summary and synthesis of ideas, this one is down, dirty and detailed. However, hidden in here is a gem that I think is going to get me the Nobel Prize for Physics. So we'll see how we go. The reason why I'm talking here is actually because about the APNIC's policy process. We distribute addresses, but the reason why we think so hard about it is to make sure that other parts of the internet work. And part of that, and a major part, is the routing system. Because if we don't have a system that can route these addresses, the addresses have no point. So we talk about aggregation. We talk about the idea that the addresses should follow the topology of the network. And if the network isn't organised along nation-state lines, neither should address distribution. And we talk about address policies that try and say addresses need to be where things that require addresses should be, because that's the way we make the routing system work. But together with that quite pragmatic view, we also carry a huge load of mythology. And some of that mythology is kind of weird. And we work that if we repeat it often enough to ourselves, if we colour the paper with enough colours, it attains the status of money. Just a mantra. You can burn it if you want, it makes no difference. In routing, we believe the routing system is a microsecond away from destruction. This research paper talks about the rapid and sustained growth of the internet. It talks about all these risks and all these nasty little deaggregators, and the routing system's going to die in any second's time. You know, and you kind of think, we say it to ourselves, but how true is it? So this is actually an exploration of trying to undercut those kinds of common mantras and myth with some real data. To actually look at this and say, what can we see inside the routing system, and are we living on the edge of stability or quite comfortable? This is my version, and this isn't Swift. This really is the internet, up and to the right. It starts at 0 and is currently sitting at 500,000. We win. You can actually see too, the global financial crisis is hidden in there in around 2008. The internet's just business. Things that affected business are visible too. We actually caused our own boom and bust, go us, 2000, 2001, and that's in the routing table. So a lot of these things that happen in the wider world are equally very, very visible inside the world of BGP. And that's certainly what we see even in the recent past, that there we see the count over the last couple of years. And interestingly, this is after we ran out in Asia Pacific. And oddly enough, exhaustion hasn't dimmed your optimism. You're routing ever finer quantities, but the routing table still grows. And occasionally people just have brainstorms and go, ugh. And what we noticed inside our particular observation system is that on one day, 25th of June, all of a sudden a whole bunch of routes just appeared. Oddly enough, it was only just us, and I blamed Martin Levy over at Hurricane Electric because he certainly gave me all these routes, and he immediately blamed AS7029, which happens to be Windstream, for giving him the bulk of these routes. Both true. But what it really says is that in the routing table, there is no God. There is no single view that trumps everyone else. Everyone's view is relative, and this is a view from me. The slopes and trends are kind of interesting, and certainly last year was fits and bursts. We tapered off in April and May, and then started doing stuff again in July, tapered off in October, and then at the end of the year another burst. When I look at other folk, I certainly see I had an aberration in the middle of the year, but generally slow and steady growth is pretty typical across the entire internet. So where did those addresses go? We ran out. What's going on? I can look at the amount of addresses routed through the year, and there I see evidence that we really did run out. But what's going on is something that all of us got surprised about. We thought, or at least I thought, I can't speak for anyone else, that as we ran out of addresses and allowed folk to monetize addresses and use those back into the market, that this would fuel the continued growth, that we seemed to be needing a lot of addresses and that somehow those unadvertised addresses would get used. That purple line at the bottom is the number of unadvertised addresses, and interestingly it's been stable since 2011. So whatever price the market has achieved has not been the price to flush them out. Buyers and sellers aren't making the matches at the level of volume that would radically change that picture. So what's going on now is that the unadvertised pool stays steady at around 50/8. That's 80 million odd addresses and nothing much is, 800 million addresses and nothing much is happening. 1/5 of the space remains locked up. In other news that's going to surprise and shock you, Aaron and APNIC are going to run out this year. Well, we all knew that. So the routed address span over the last year, people are mucking around with /8s, but in the last year or so, we continue to see more addresses hitting the routed network. And the number of ASs, slow, steady growth. Put all those together, and what we actually see is the average prefix size is getting smaller. This whole idea that we needed to aggregate in routing isn't true anymore. The amount of router prefix is getting finer and finer. And those folk who are thinking that maybe instead of routing addresses, you can route unstructured names or route money, you're not far away, because the capabilities of this system are truly awesome. And what we're actually doing is routing ever finer addresses and accommodating in the system that seems to scale brilliantly. Overall metrics for last year, the internet isn't growing by 100% a year anymore. It isn't even growing maybe by 30%. The basic metrics is around 8 to 10% per year at this particular point. Population grows at 3%. The internet grows at 8%. Life is normal. We are nothing special anymore. We're just business. So that's V4. V6. Wow, all that proselytizing, all that V6 is wonderful. There's World IPv6 Day. There's the long-term results. Geez. There was a slow and steady growth that World IPv6 Day didn't actually alter. V6 has its own trajectory. It's slow and deliberate. It is not fantastically high. There's a slight kick at the edge of the year, but in terms of the number of routes I see, 16,000 routes. Even in terms of address space, it's slow and steady growth, which is not what we saw earlier. So all of those metrics, AS count, oh, that's not good. That's tapering off. It's meant to be up, not down, guys. Up, more, right? So what's the growth schedules? Certainly better than V4, growing at a rate of 20 to 40% per year. But the bad news is that at this rate for ASs, we're finally going to get universal deployment in 2030. That's not possible. Not going to happen. It's just too long. Something needs to change inside all of that. We need to make that change. So many of you run routers. Many of you buy it from routing vendors. Most of you seem to think that your routers are going to last for some years, not months. How big a router do you buy? What should you be looking at? Despite the fact we ran out of addresses, we can probably make some projections here. This is the first order differential. I'm using the power of maths. And oddly enough, the first order differential is not growing fantastically. In most of the models for V4 come out best at a model that looks strongly linear. And when you try and put other models on it, like exponential growth or similar, the fit just doesn't seem to be very convincing. It just seems to grow too fast. And quite frankly, the data doesn't support it. So at this point, I would say with a pretty high confidence interval, that we're growing at around 50,000 new entries per year, and that's just grinding its way through the system. And so the projections for the next few years see us slowly growing from around 500,000 entries to 750,000 entries in the table. It's possible in an exponential model it could be as high as 1 million. I don't describe that a very high level of confidence. That's an outlier prediction. V6, different kind of trajectory, more noise, more spurts, more noise, but certainly growing a little faster. And those are the projections, the exponential, the linear, the quadratic. Quite frankly, the exponential still looks credible. And we might get over the same period up to about 127,000 entries. Why does this matter? Because it's the cost of routing that matters. This is all about Moore's law. Because quite frankly, if you're growing faster than Moore's law, you're growing faster than silicon at constant cost. All of a sudden you have to pour money in. The unit cost of routing gets higher, not lower, and that means pain for everybody. So Moore's law is kind of a useful threshold here, and over the last few years since 71, technology has largely tracked this. So this is doubling between every 18 months to 24 months, and we can apply that curve to BGP. There's the application of the curve of BGP to Moore's law. No cause for concern. So I'd certainly not say that Moore's law is an issue here. V6, we're kind of growing at an exponential level, something approaching Moore's law. That's certainly true, but the numbers are tiny. If you're going to hit the big red alarm bell, you're not going to hit it over this. So quite frankly, the current routing system is growing with absolutely no pain. This is not the reason why we would press the alarm bell. But some folk argue it's not the size, it's what you do with it that counts. And so what we're looking at is, what do we do with BGP? How much does it have instability? Any distance vector protocol grows badly. Distance vector protocols are as noisy as hell, and the noise is actually relative to the population. So in theory, what we should see is up and to the right. The number of announcements and withdrawals per day should be hitting the ceiling. That's flat. This is not right. Either I'm wrong, you're wrong, or the internet's doing something completely surprising. Because since 2008, 100,000 updates a day. Everyone sees it all over the planet. This is very, very strange. So who is doing updates? Who are the naughty people? Who are the naughty boys of the internet? Because only a few of you cause noise on any day. That room has 20,000 people in it. Not 50, not 100, but 20. And they're self-selecting naughty people. And the growth of the noise level is much, much smaller than the growth of the routing table. It's the log value of the routing table. So that is getting bizarre. That inside a constantly growing pattern, the underlying characteristics of routing are almost flat. And even more bizarre is the performance of BGP. You ever noticed when you put more cars on the road that your trip to work takes longer? You just can't drive at the same speed when there's someone in front of you. Well, you can try, but ultimately the crash is inevitable. So if you whack on 500,000 more cars into this system, you should find the network gets really, really crap. It doesn't. The average time to converge in BGP has been 70 seconds since 2008. Again, you look at this and you expect damage, and what you see is constancy. That the technology is overperforming and it's introducing stability where there was none. This is entropy decreasing without energy. Remember what I said about Nobel Prizes? We're getting to a new law here of cosmological constants, that somewhere inside this system is an element of stability that is entirely unpredicted, and the reasons are not totally obvious. But we can find one or two if you look very, very hard. If you're a new ISP, who do you connect to? And the obvious answer is, I try and connect as close as possible to everybody else. So the network has never become longer and stringier. As we cram more and more people into the network, its diameter has actually been constant. Folk tend to drive their connections into the centre. The long-haul submarine cables have more and more tenants on them. folk build their own networks to interconnect more and more richly. And the result is that the average AS path length to span the internet remains largely constant. This is a graph of all of the pairs of route views every hour since 1996. There's a lot of data behind those colours, but what it really says is that the physics of the internet are different than the physics of telephony. That the physics of the internet have actually managed to breed this extraordinary rich interconnectivity. And as we increase that interconnectivity, oddly enough, BGP, the routing protocol, works better. It manages to cope with an ever larger pool of people to perform convergence in 70 seconds irrespective. That's fantastic. So inside all of that, I really can't be concerned. V4 has been pummeling away doing the internet and routing it without any particular cause for concern. What about V6? It was growing, and from 2008 to 2011, apart from when my router lost it, it just simply grew. But after 2011, it starts to look like V4. Maybe V6 truly has come of age, that all of a sudden the underlying metrics of growth are constant. Is there a bad boy room in V6? Oh yes, there is. How many folk are in that room? Less than 1,000 prefixes every day. Which 1,000? I don't know. You don't know. But that's all it is. So there's this curious mode that instability is a limited function, not a general condition. How long does it take to converge in V6? Slightly longer, 90 seconds. That's nothing. You know, what's going on is the same topology, the same average AS path length is visible in V6 and V4. There was always this theory that when the topology of V6 mapped the topology of V4, V6 was following the money. As soon as V6 is following the money, it's not a toy anymore. It's what people exchange, peer and settle on. So all of a sudden now I would actually claim that looking at that figure and looking at the topologies of V4 and V6, it's not a toy. You don't give it away. It's part of the way in which interconnectivity business is traded, exchanged and bartered, exactly the same as V4. And the outcome is the same. You want to get close to the middle. And as you get close to the middle, the overall performance of the system stays constant and doesn't get worse. So that just says all that. That's terrific. So the next thing is all about conservatism and behaviour. How good are we at making sure only aggregates get routed? To what extent do we still say that deaggregating is polluting the internet, causing garbage for everyone? Who's advertising more specifics, and is that good or bad? So here's Relcom. I didn't call them out for anything in particular, but there they are advertising a bunch of /24s because they can. Here's the folk who do it. Windstream's on this list. Telekomunikasi Indonesia was number 3 on that day. And so on and so forth, Korea Telecom. These folk all advertise more specifics, and there are a lot of them. These are unnecessary in the grand scheme of things. They don't add information to the routing system. They simply make finer-grained objects. And the real question is this noise or value? So when you look at this, you look at the number of more specifics in the routing table since 2002. Looks much the same. Let's check that theory. This is percentages. Since 2002, 50% of the internet's more specifics. That's flat. So how do we get there? Interesting, everybody sees this. I look at route views, that's flat as well. How much address space? It increases. But, you know, who's doing it? Only 332 origin ASs do 50% of these more specifics. So it's a very small bunch of people advertising half of the routing slots in the address space. If this was Bitcoins, they'd be as rich as hell because, you know, slots make money. So these 332 are doing an extraordinary amount of more specifics. It's a very, very skewed distribution. The top 20 ASs, 40,000 of them. And here's much the same list. You've seen it before. So in V6 is what's going on. Well, like I said, V6 has come of age. More specifics are now doing V6 as well. It's not quite 50%. We're up at 30% and growing. We'll get there sooner or later. Does everyone see that in V6? Yes, Route View says everyone sees it. How much address space? Well, low at the moment, but it's growing up and to the right. Are we getting better or worse? Is this message that we keep on pummeling in the routing community, don't pollute the planet? This is just crap. We've all got to take it. If you send out more specifics, you're damaging the entire world. So I took the top 10 ASs every single day who'd advertised more specifics, and I tracked their history for 3 years. This is the list of folk who are in that list. Not that many, and if you review the slides and see yourself there, I'm watching you. And I look at your track record over 3 years. Some folk are up and to the right. Some folk are down and to the right. Some folk are steady. Some folk do step functions. That's Brownian motion, isn't it? That's just random. It's just individual behaviour. So we're not getting any better, we're not getting any dumber. But out of that random noise comes a flat 50%. So again, out of complete random noise with no energy, entropy is decreasing. The order in the universe is getting better. This is one of these theories of the internet that, cosmologically speaking, there is no heat death in store for us. But without energy, we are increasing the order in the internet rather than its disorder. This is bizarre and Nobel Prize winning, I am sure. So, at some point, what's going on is aside all of this random noise, it's not getting any better, but it's not getting any worse. There's this sort of evenness about this entire system that is simply strange. But the issue is there are these smaller number of people doing all these specifics. Are they noisy people? Are they the people who are those 20,000 noisy prefixes? Where do I find updates? So I can look at this and actually categorize these more specifics into red, blue, and green. Red is senseless routing vandalism that has no purpose in being there. You know who you are. Blue is hole punching, that I've taken a bunch of addresses from my upstream and I'm advertising it in a different way. And the green is traffic engineering. So those are the types of more specifics. And in general, senseless routing vandalism is about 40% of the problem. Hole punching is about 30%. Traffic engineering is about 25%. More specifics of traffic engineering? Not really, just a very small amount. So who generate the updates? The vandals, the hole punchers, or the engineers? Let's find out. Because we can look at the daily updates and go, wow, this is interesting. Even though more specifics are 50% of the routing table, they're 80% of the updates. So yes, these more specifics are the culprits. They make up the bulk of what's going on inside routing. Those small number of ASs are indeed responsible for most of the noise. What sort of specifics are doing this? I can do a few sort of analyses of these and find that it's actually not the vandals who are the worst at this. It's the hole punchers. I don't know why. It's not quite obvious to me what's going on. But yes, those more specifics do generate more noise, and the hole punchers generate more noise than the others. And I can do a stability metric and show you much the same thing. The traffic engineers generate as much updates as I'd expect. The senseless routing vandals are generally stable. And my suspicion is they're advertising those specifics without any particular reason. So they're not mucking around with them. They don't change them. They're stable because they're unnecessary. And the ones that actually do change a fair deal are the ones that are punching holes in other people's aggregates. And perhaps that's why that they actually need to change things to make it work. So, profile of BGP, it really is true that more specifics are our problem. They generate around 4 times the updates. And of those, it's actually not the senseless routing vandals that are most to blame, it's the hole punchers that give us the most problem in BGP. Should we do something about it? Should we take those people, some of you are here, take them quietly out there and do something with their advertisements? Because certainly we make BGP the collective garbage dump of the internet. We ignore it, we just leave it go. Could we do better? Of course we could. We could do a lot better, because a very small number of origin ASs are responsible for a huge amount of the dynamic metrics of growth in routing. And we can do a lot better. We can rationalize this and apply enormous amounts of pressure on them. And yes, it will actually make BGP an even better place. We could do better. But should we? What's the problem? Is routing blowing up? No. Are your routers going to melt tomorrow? No. Is the modest amount of attention you put in BGP producing fantastic results already? Yes. So in some ways, if you said to me, I could spend 3 man-years of effort and get rid of my more specific, should I? I'd sit here and go, gee, that's a really hard question for me to answer. I can't tell. Because in some ways, even though you're doing damage, and on a real scale, that's a terrible thing, you know, don't damage the rest of the world. But honestly, the damage isn't that slight, and the equipment we run is readily able to cope with what you're doing. Don't make it any worse. Keep that level of entropy constant. We're okay. We're okay. Make it worse and things go bad. So what it appears right now is we're doing something phenomenally good in routing. It's unconscious. It's a collective action that's actually got a beneficial outcome. There are no routing police. You don't need a ticket to go into the bad boys club or the good boys club or anything else. The collective random actions of a whole bunch of folk actually produce an outcome that has an astonishing amount of stability and beneficial outcome to all of us. As I said, this is the laws of physics turned on its head. It should never have happened. It is, and we don't understand why. The problem is that because we don't understand why, when we damage it, we might only realise when it's too late. So whatever you're doing, don't change. Thank you. I will try and take some questions if there are any. But as I said, it was a technical talk very quickly delivered, for which I apologise. Okay.
Cool, thank you, Geoff.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to now invite the chair of APNIC, Maemura Akinori, to give a closing note. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Akinori Maemura, Chair of the Executive Council of APNIC. That's really great to have the two great presentations in the closing plenary, and I am a bit excited to have that, and I need to come down to make my address. As well as the two excellent presentations here, I appreciate all the speakers throughout this week who brought excellent knowledge, which is indispensable for keeping the internet working and evolving. We had countless fantastic sessions this week, but among them, I'd like to highlight and appreciate our partners who collaborated with APRICOT this time. ICANN, which launched Asia Pacific Hub last year, brought ICANN update session this time. We expect the collaboration with ICANN will increase in an organic way throughout the future. ISOC this time kindly brought their NetOps workshops, where a bunch of presentations which showed up-to-date operational technologies. APCert joined the APRICOT this time to have sessions where a number of certs share their practices to keep the internet secure. Asia Pacific IPv6 Task Force session was the full lineup of the IPv6 speeches for future of the internet. And this year, it is the very pivotal year for the governance of the internet, since ISTOR leaders published Montevideo Statement in October. We have INET initiative, OneNet initiative, sorry. We will have the Net Mundial in Brazil. It's also known as the Global Multi-Stakeholder Meeting on the Future of the Internet Governance, which will be held in English in April, as well as various United Nations and IT user activities. In the session on Wednesday, the title, From Governance to Cooperation, Decoding the Puzzle. It's a really explaining title. Their high-level panel tackled with a wide spectrum of internet governance issues, and had a really substantial discussion there. All of them are all about how we run the internet now and toward the future. And all those who got together here, it's you, had a really here, it's you, and do and will work on. Cooperation, collaboration, networking, APNIC is the place for those. And I'd like to ask you to not to forget Friday program, which is the APNIC member meeting, which our main business. It is not limited to the APNIC members, but open for everyone, and where you can have the all update about what this APNIC is doing right now. Thank you very much, all you come here and join here to do the internet and keep the internet running. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Akinori. Okay, so now I'd like Philip to come back up on stage to say a few words of thanks.
So I'm going to be slightly different, I think. What I'll do is, while I give the vote of thanks, rather than as I run through thanking everybody, I think, Akinori, if you would come back here, what we'll do, as I mention each of our supporters, I would like you to give them a token of our appreciation. I think we do it like that. It will work a little bit better and just upset the process a little bit for you.
You're mucking up my notes, you know that, eh?
No, it'll all work out.
Like a program.
Just fine. So, I don't know, I usually, when it's my turn up here at the end of all this, I do the pause and I think of all the work that's gone in over the last week for everybody who's been involved with APRICOT. Well, I should say the last 2 weeks. As I mentioned in my opening remarks on Monday afternoon, this conference had to be put together in 4 weeks, and I'm not going to go through all the reasons for that again. And that was, it was quite a significant undertaking that, as I said on Monday, we don't particularly want to repeat because of the amount of effort that was involved. The commentary that I've heard throughout the weeks from many of the delegates is how much they've appreciated. I mean, all of us here who are doing all the technical support tend to be behind the scenes. We see everything that's going wrong, and we see all the issues and so forth. And we're working very, very hard to make sure that we sort those before I suppose the general delegates see any of it. But many folks have said, you know, how well the conference has gone, and nobody's commented on anything that, well, we have seen that hasn't quite worked how we expected it. Maybe we set high expectations, or too high expectations, or maybe, I don't know, we're just all accustomed to things not being perfect all of the time. So I think the first thing we really need to do is, how do I work this? I don't know if I can work this. No, that points it. I'm trying. That's what I'm doing, yeah. Who knows? Anyway, okay. It's probably been a long week for this thing, and the battery is running out as we're getting tired as well. So the first thing is really want to thank all our sponsors. As you can see from the board here, it's been a very impressive signboard that we've managed to arrange. We managed to retain a lot of the sponsors who originally committed to support us during the event construction in Bangkok. And we've gained many more supporters from the local community here in Malaysia. And I think, you know, displaying them on the board like this for all of you to see is just, you know, I really do want to recognize their generosity in, well, really supporting this event. And we normally rely so much on having a local host to pool the sponsors in, and well, having no local host here in Malaysia, and still being able to pool a lot of those in through the efforts of the APNIC Secretariat, I think has been pretty amazing. If I look at some of the sponsorship we've had over the years. So that's why I thought I'd just upset Crystal a little bit and mess up the process. So as we go through my vote of thanks, I just want to sort of indicate each sponsor, and we give them a momentum as we do this. So True and Nectec bid for this event, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It's been quite a lot of time. They've been in preparation for this conference for a significantly long time as well, right up until mid-January this year, when the state of emergency in the city of Bangkok really caused them to give us the advice to, consider another location. And the events in Bangkok, even at the moment, are still very sad for their community, and of course disappointing for us as the international community, because of the missing out of the conference and because of the impact it's having on the local internet industry. We have several members of the Thai internet community here, and we really do appreciate their participation in the conference in Kuala Lumpur. So I really do want to recognize True and Nectec for all the work that they put in, all the preparation, the many conference calls that we've had with them over the time. And I don't want to, I do want to emphasize how much work that they put in before we had to do the move. Internet access was provided by TM. Again, trying to put connection into a hotel in probably I don't know how much notice we gave them. It probably wasn't even 4 weeks notice, because we were spending quite a bit of time sorting out venue and so forth before we even got that. But TM came to the fore very, very quickly and provided us with 150 megabits of internet access. It hasn't all been as visible as we had hoped in the, certainly on the APRICOT B wireless network, for those of you who are the real techies amongst us. All the more reason to provide the 802.11a, the 5 gigahertz wireless for venues like this. So those folks with newer devices have had great internet experience, and those with others maybe not as good as we would have liked, given the profusion of other wireless access points in the hotel. So we thank TM for providing the internet access at such short notice for us. I think I'll just carry on. We can do the certificate and so forth a little bit. So you can sit down, Akinori. I'm sorry. It's fine. Opening reception. Opening reception, MCMC, provided the support for opening reception on the Monday evening over in the Pyramid Hotel. The workshops, those of us who were in the workshop, the instructors and the participants, Taylor's University hosted us. I think I've gone round in circles too much today. I think Taylor's University is over that way, if you look, maybe about approximately anyway. They're very close here, 20 minutes walk, probably 20 minutes by car and traffic as well. But they're very close. We had a lovely time there last week, superb host, and again, we're very appreciative for the facility and all the effort that they made to look after us. We had Equinix doing the peering social. Equinix has been a long-term partner. We appreciate their support, and we hope they carry on supporting the peering activities within APRICOT for years to come. With many community sponsors, folks have given all kinds of donations, big and small, and helped us in various shapes or forms. We'll come back to them in a bit more detail as we hand out the tokens. Bronze sponsors, again, who've helped us with covering various parts of the conference, the small contributions. You've seen all the sponsors, of course, have the tables outside, and they've certainly had good opportunity to mix and mingle with the participants. What else? Network hardware. We knocked on the door of Cisco. Well, we already were talking with Cisco Thailand for the Bangkok iteration, and to Cisco's credit, they managed to redirect things to Kuala Lumpur at very, very short notice. They got Cisco Malaysia involved, and between the two country organizations, they again fulfilled our needs with access points and switch infrastructure and so forth. So very appreciative of the thanks there. Fellowships, there were several fellows here for APRICOT. Fellowships were funded by Internet Society and the Network Startup Resource Center. Both organizations have a mission to improve the internet, especially in developing countries and so on. And so having them support our fellowship programs so actively is really, really appreciated. I'll use this opportunity to ask other organizations to join Internet Society and NSRC to do likewise. The more support we can get, the more folks from less advantaged parts of the internet in the Asia-Pacific region we can have coming to this conference. Internet Society also supported our newcomers event. We welcome newcomers to every single APRICOT. It's a chance for them to be not intimidated by the frequent participants, but be introduced to the conference, get to meet who are hopefully now familiar faces and feel as though they're part of the conference itself. Several local supporters, but the 5 organizations here, I was going to read them out, but I can't read the first one. It's probably this screen, but so Chris Minogue, Myra, and Fibercom, Server One. So very appreciative again of their support coming in so quickly to help with the conference. I had to add this slide in. APNIC, of course, is the organizer of this. APIA has asked APNIC to run the secretariat for APRICOT for, well, it's been over a year now. And so APNIC very generously has supported the closing social, which we'll enjoy tonight after we finish here. And of course, supporters of the APNIC member meeting tomorrow, our friends at CNNIC, KISA, NICSI, JPNIC, and TWNIC. And finally, the AMM closing dinner tomorrow night is supported by APG and PH Kulu. I think we've covered all the sponsors. It's been quite a long list. I'm not accustomed to going through such a long list as this, and Akinori is going to be quite busy in a few minutes with the recognitions. But I think I'll just finish this, and then we can get on. So first off, again, I had to add this in, and I don't want to miss out thanking the APNIC Secretariat for doing this. I mean, one of the things when APNIC took on the Secretariat for APRICOT was that it meant organizing this conference. It's not just an APNIC conference, it is APRICOT, of which has many, many component parts. Of course, a major part is the APNIC 37 conference. But missing themselves out from this set of slides here doesn't do justice to all the work that Tony and his team, yet again, as I said on Monday, have had to do in the last 4 weeks to put this together. It's been pretty amazing. Need to thank the APRICOT Management Committee. These are volunteers from across the community. It's all the way from API board to staff from APNIC to people who have hosted APRICOT in the past to our future hosts and any other volunteers. They turn up every month and every other week, conference calls and so forth to help with the organization. Program committee, volunteers from the industry. We had 50 members of the program committee this year. Program committee will stay on to help with the content, technical content for APNIC 38, or at least I hope they will. We have a fellowship committee. They were working back in October, November to put decide the fellowship. We had a large number of applications, as we always do. Limited funds, so I'll drop my hint about more funding for the fellowship program again. The more supporting funds we can get, the more fellows we can include. Technical committee and the volunteers from the local internet technical community, do need to thank them. They were ably led by Maz. Maz is practicing for APRICOT next year. I think he realizes that by now. I hope he's in the room, unless he's taking the network out from various parts of the hotel that we have to leave. But he, along with John Lee from Global Transit locally, plus the other volunteers, have done a lot of work to get the network up and running for us. I'd like to thank all the instructors, the workshop instructors, tutorial instructors, the speakers throughout the week, participants, both who've come here, participants already on their way home, all the remote participants as well, all the local volunteer staff helping this week, and of course last week we've had several volunteers, as you might have seen, at the registration counter running around, helping with different things, the staff at Taylor's University, the staff at the Sunway Hotel. They've all been most obliging, most helpful. Nothing has been too challenging for any of them, and it's always been smiling face in any of the assistants. And it's just such a pleasure to work with such good local support like this. And I hope I've covered everybody. If I've missed anybody out, I must apologize. Before I say see you in Fukuoka, Japan, and I'll get into trouble for saying this, I must point out or single out Molly for all the work that she's done. Please would you join me in a round of applause? Molly's been the project manager for this conference, and so she has been very much the lead person to make all this happen under Tony Smith's guidance. So again, thank you all for all the work that you've had to do as a project manager, project leader, the sleepless nights, the sleepy days, and so on. But I think you can get a rest very, very soon. And with that, APRICOT 2015 is in Fukuoka. The 2015 team will tell you a lot more about that in a few minutes' time. And I'll hand back to Crystal.
Is it working? It is now. Okay. Microphone's got a delay on it. So we're handing out certificates now, Philip?
Yes.
Okay, you sure?
Well, I can change the running sheet.
Okay, so this is my Miss America chance to hand out certificates to the sponsors. So if the sponsors could please approach the stage. I'm going to send it this side. First, NECTEC and True. Do you have representatives? Then TM and MCMC. Taylor's University. Equinix. It's a bit like lottery.
Sure.
I think I might just go back to the certificates instead of trying to read my list. We've got Telecom Malaysia. I knew this was going to happen. Yeah, take two. Okay. I don't know if we've got all the sponsors here. Taylor's, do we have someone from Taylor's University? Going once, going twice? No? Okay, next one. I feel like an auctioneer. What have we got? Here we go. I'll just run across the stage. I've called out Equinix. Anyone from Equinix?
Equinix.
Nope. Okay. Which one is it? Big Globe. Do we have a Big Globe representative? Well, this is fun.
Big up there.
Big Globe, yay! Thank you. Full Root? Anyone from Full Root? Full Root? Sorry, my accent does get a bit strong sometimes. BTI Systems.
APIA systems? Someone? Can I take it?
Dot Asia.
Asia. Asia.
Extreme Broadband. Have I done this one already? JPEX.
JPIX.
JPIX, sorry. JPIX. Okay, Google. Google. ICANN.
Oh.
MyIX. SoftBank. Alcatel-Lucent. It's a very long walk. Burn off your lunch. JPNet.
JPNet. All right.
Netca System. Netca System.
Netcar.
Netca. Network hardware resale. Are you in the room or have you left the country?
Network hardware resale. No.
NTT Communications. Yay. Telstra Global. BTI Systems.
BTI.
BTI. Cisco.
Who's from Cisco?
No Cisco. ISOC? Internet Society? I can see Andy Linton moving, no? Oh, no Cisco. NSRC? Nixie? Nixie? CNNIC? TWNIC? JPNIC? KISA? No. UPG? PH Colo? Fibercom? No. Micros? No. Minog? Huh? Norini? You do it so well. Myren? Myren? Ah. And our lucky last, before we find out about APRICOT next year, is IP Server 1. Nope, not here. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, paper works, doesn't it? Okay, if we could please have Maemura-san to welcome us to APRICOT. Yeah. To just talk to us about APRICOT 2015 in Fukuoka, Japan.
I have my own reason to stay in front. All right. Yes, video first. Thank you. Right. I tried to have the 8 minutes version of this promotion video, but I failed. Thank you very much again, Akinori Maemura. This time it's for the APRICOT APAN 2015 Japan Organizing Committee, which is formed by the 8 main organizing member for running the APRICOT APAN 2015. Please please stand up if you those from the organizing committee. Yes, there, yes. Thank you very much. Okay, 2015. It's coming to Fukuoka. This is the first time since 2005 for APRICOT Kyoto to Japan, and this is the second joint conference between APRICOT and APAN. After very successful joint meeting in 2011 in Hong Kong. In Japan, Fukuoka is regarded as the gateway city to Asia, which is in the west side of Japan, in the Kyushu, and very near to the Korean Peninsula. Then the Fukuoka gathers a lot of visitors from all around the region and all around the world. It is very famous for the very good food, especially the very good seafood. And it is not very expensive than in Tokyo. Very cheap. You can enjoy. And it is as well the urban area with the Fukuoka city has a 1.5 million population. And end of February to the beginning of March, when APRICOT APAN 2015 will be held, is actually too early for sakura, cherry blossom, but we are very happy to invite you to Fukuoka in a very good season of a plum, which is the flower for Fukuoka Prefecture, and we have a really big shrine whose name is the Dazaifu Tenmangu. It's really famous for the plum flowers, and you will be welcomed by the full bloom of the plum at the time. So, this is the APRICOT APAN 2015 logo. Will be held from February 24th to March 6th of the 2015 in Fukuoka. Then Japanese says Fukuoka ni kinshai. Kinshai is the please come in the Fukuokan dialect of Japanese. So I'd like to place the heartfelt Fukuoka ni kinshai to you, and I really appreciate if you come to Fukuoka to join us, APRICOT APAN 2015. Thank you very much.
Well, that now brings us to the end of APRICOT 2014, so thank you for all coming. Just a reminder that there is a closing dinner tonight, and it is Samui Pyramid down in Mantra Indian Asian restaurant, and that starts at 7 p.m. So this may be the end of the APRICOT conference, but remember tomorrow there's the APNIC AMN tomorrow. Everyone's welcome to attend and get an update on APNIC's activities during the past year. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully see you next year.